I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Chapter 7, the bone chapter, with you guys, and that's because they hit bones pretty hard in lab. I just wanted to give you a couple of little helpful points as you go through this chapter. All the bones are color-coded in all the pictures in the textbook. So, for example, if the sphenoid bone is pink on this picture, it's going to be pink on all the other pictures as well. That can help you find it no matter which image you're looking at. So it's still pink here, and you can see a sphenoid sinus in there. You can see that the sphenoid comes around to the lateral side of the skull. If you look at the inferior portion, you can see it's still up over there. That can really help you study if you pay attention to those colors. Some other things that I want to mention that I don't think they cover in lab for you guys. The spinal cord is supposed to have some curvatures that go along with it. Curvatures help the spine bear weight without damaging the bones very much. So these are the normal curvatures that the spine has. This is from the anterior side. So notice when you see it from the front or the back, it should be pretty straight up and down. But if you look at it from a lateral view, you're going to have some concave curvatures, some convex curvatures. Those curvatures are found in specific regions of the spine, and again, they help you bear weight. If you get additional curvatures that are in excess of what normal is, that's a condition that can cause a lot of pain for a person. So one of the first ones there is scoliosis. And so remember, the spine is supposed to be straight up and down when you see it from the front or the back. If you have a curvature that goes off to a side, that's what scoliosis is. This is a fairly severe form of scoliosis over here. Scoliosis is usually tested for in sometimes middle school or high school. You go to the school nurse, they have you bend over, they look at what your spine looks like in different angles, and then if they detect that curvature, they'll tell you you should probably go see a doctor so that you can have that looked at. A kyphosis, so again, you're supposed to have this curvature to the thoracic spine. If it bends more than normal and you end up sort of hunchbacked, that's a kyphotic curvature, or kyphosis is the condition when it's curving in excess of what it's supposed to. And if a person ends up sway-backed where they have a very pronounced lumbar curvature, that is lordosis. And notice that it's very common in pregnant women to develop that, and often it will go away, but that can end up putting pressure on some of the nerves down here, and so that's an abnormal curvature as well. Most of the rest of this chapter is just running you through the different bones and parts, but the other thing that I did want to mention as we're talking here about the skull is the intervertebral discs that are between each of your vertebrae. It is made out of fibrocartilage, so what we're going to have is this ring of fibrous tissue, and ordinarily that ring is nice and complete and it helps to maintain the shape. If, usually due to an excess of weight being borne by your intervertebral disc, that ring gets weaker, the gel that had been inside of that disc starts to bulge out through the weak spot in the annulus fibrosus, and then that bulge ends up putting pressure on the nerves that are exiting the spinal cord. It can start by causing pain. It can end up pinching that nerve so completely that you can't feel or move whatever that nerve had been connected to. So herniated discs in humans are usually fixed with surgery to help decompress this area so that the nerve can work again. All right. Next little blurb that I have for you guys is kind of about how do you figure out which vertebra is sitting on a table during a test when you have one. So this is the checklist that I go through to figure out if there's just one vertebrae, what is it on the table. So the first thing that I look for is, does the vertebra have a body? So the body is the portion like this right here that is the weight-bearing portion. And the only one of your vertebrae that doesn't have a body is this one right here, the atlas. And so if it does not have a body, you know you have the atlas, which is the very first cervical vertebra. If, on the other hand, it does have a body, it's one of the other vertebrae, so you have to keep going. Next question I ask myself is, does it have a dens or an odontoid process? That's one of those structures that has multiple names. This is the pivot that allows you to shake your head yes or no, and the only vertebra that has that is the axis. And so if you answer yes to this question, you know it's got to be the axis. If you answer no, it's got to be one of the other vertebrae. Next thing that you look for is, does it have some extra holes? So I'm going to come back here to this picture momentarily. All the vertebrae have a vertebral foramen where the spinal cord passes through, but only the cervical vertebrae also have these transverse foramina, or transverse foramen is singular. You've got some arteries that run through there. Notice that the thoracic and the lumbar vertebrae do not have those extra holes. Now the top two, the atlas and the axis, also have those. It's difficult to see in this one, but it is there as well. That's why you needed to weed those out before you get to this question. But if we have transverse foramina, it's one of your cervical vertebrae. If it doesn't, we come down here to the last question. The last question asks you, does the vertebra have rib scars? So rib scars can be found in a couple of different places, towards the anterior side of the body or towards the outside lateral edge of the transverse process. The rib scars are the places where ribs were actually attached, and ribs are only attached to the thoracic vertebrae. So if you have a vertebra sitting on a table and it has a rib scar, it has to be a thoracic vertebrae. If you have answered no to all of the other questions, by default you have a lumbar vertebrae off over there. And so ask yourself those questions and it will get you to the right answer 100% of the time. Alright, from there we're going to skip down to one of the very last things that I'm going to talk about in this chapter because they don't cover it in lab for you guys. As the bones are forming, you end up with soft spots. I'm going to back out of here for just a second so I can just scroll that much faster through this. Those soft spots that are found in infants' heads, they're called fontanelles. Eventually, as ossification continues, those are going to be filled in. It's kind of, I don't know, weird or creepy depending on how you want to look at it when you see babies that are suckling, because you'll actually see the fontanelle rise and fall as they do that. You have to be very gentle with them because that's not bone and you can damage the brain. The other thing I want to mention in this chapter is the cleft palate. So your maxilla actually starts out as two separate bones during embryonic development, and they are supposed to fuse together so you get a midline, but they are fused with a suture towards the midline. If those bones don't fuse, you end up with a cleft palate, and cleft palates can be minerally sort of disabling or disfiguring, or they can cause major problems because it can also mean the meninges didn't fuse together in the brain, and so it can lead to more brain infections like meningitis. They can also end up aspirating food down in their windpipe instead of in the digestive system, and so it can be a major problem. You don't see many people in the United States with this because we have surgery to fix this, but if you go to other countries where surgery is not as readily available, you can still find a lot of people who have cleft palate. That should get you through chapter 7. I'll go ahead and post a coloring quiz for you guys on the bones just to help you out since your lab practical is coming up and make sure you know the bones that you're supposed to know.